Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the 8th round already of the UCI Cyclocross World Cup, which took place in Antwerp on the Linker Oever. With me here to discuss that is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Before we get into talking about the race, let's first look at another race that we'll have later this season, the Benidorm World Cup, going to feature a bit of sand, maybe not as much as we saw today in Antwerp, but there will be sand and it will be epic. Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel, both confirmed to be racing there. Use the code CXSocial for 20% discount on your tickets for the Benidorm World Cup. Now let's dive into the racing today, because Wout van Aert, the rider who started his season here, had the fastest start. He went into the field first after starting on the second row. Mathieu van der Poel also got off to a good start, went into the field as 5th. Tom Pidcock didn't have a good start. He only went into the field as 29th and never really featured at the front of the race anymore. Van Aert at the end of the first lap got overtaken by Van der Poel, and Van der Poel upped the pace in the second lap. He placed the first serious attack, and that was immediately enough to end all hopes of a battle between Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel. Van der Poel was simply better than the rest today. He opened the gap, as said, in the second lap. 10 seconds became 20 seconds, and eventually it became half a minute. It stayed stable at that, and then Van der Poel just relaxed in the final phases of the race. The gap went down a bit, but it couldn't stop Van der Poel from claiming his second World Cup win and second win overall this season. 2 wins in 3 races, not a bad start to the season for him. Behind that, Van Aert was in a battle for second place for a while, together with Sweeck, Van der Haar and Vanthourenhout. However, eventually Van Aert also dropped them because he was simply a bit stronger, which left Vanthourenhout battling with Sweeck and Van der Haar for the 3rd podium spot. But Van der Haar was the first to crack there. Sweeck and Vanthourenhout stayed together until the final lap, but Vanthourenhout ultimately edged out Sweeck for the final spot on the podium. So the podium was Van der Poel ahead of Van Aert and Michael Vanthourenhout. Season got underway here for Wout van Aert. Many of us were hoping for a battle here between Van Aert and Van der Poel. Did you expect that Van der Poel would be a class above Wout van Aert at this point in the season?
Well, I mean, a class apart, not in that sense that the difference would be huge, but I definitely expected Van der Poel to be a little bit better than Van Aert, and especially on a course like this. We already talked about the sand and the technical parts. It's really, in my opinion, a course that suits Van der Poel just a little bit more. Yeah, and then I think, that is, for him, it just went a little bit smoother. I think the first lap Van Aert was definitely strong. But then Van der Poel said, what you can do, I can do it just a little bit better. And, that second lap really set the tone for the rest of the race. And he was just able to, I wouldn't say cruise away, because it takes a lot of effort to do what he did there. And he had to go for it for the whole race to make sure that, Van Aert wasn't closing in. But, in the end, I think that the difference was there. Was it I kind of expected this. I think that Van Aert is the rider that he is, definitely should have been able to finish on the podium, and to be honest, should have been second, and he did just that. And for Van der Poel, if he is in form, that he is normally the guy to beat, and I think those two things, really set the tone in this race.
For me, it was just ticking boxes from what we said in the preview podcast. I did expect Van der Poel to reach this level, and the gap of 30 seconds over Wout van Aert for me was not shocking. For me, peak Mathieu van der Poel in cross is just better than peak Wout van Aert. And that is simply due to Van der Poel having a better technique. And today was a very good display of that. Van der Poel was, especially in the sand sections, a lot faster than Van Aert. Van Aert could compensate on the running sections. And I don't think Van Aert is a bad rider. And I don't think that Van Aert or Van der Poel are in their best form. And let's face it, it's the first race of Wout van Aert. Sure, last year he came in and won his first race by a country mile, but that was on a very different course. That was a power course in Boom. It was muddy. Today was a fast course. He needed to adapt to his cross bike. Yes, he's done more cross training ahead of the season than Van der Poel had when he came in, but still, racing is in no way comparable with the training you've done. You need to get racing under your belt. 30 seconds, well in the end it's a bit less, is not shocking. I think Van Aert is working with a plan. He wants to be at his best at the World Championships. I think if he's at his best there and Van der Poel is as well, I would still back Van der Poel, but that doesn't matter because these are two very great riders. Today was a course for Van der Poel. He did what I expected, and as you say, Van Aert also did what I expected. He said he was surprised with that second place because he took rest and had a cold, but the base level of Van Aert and Van der Poel is just so much higher than the level of the usual suspects in the cross, and it's in no way meant to discredit the performances of Vanthourenhout, Van der Haar, Iserbyt, Zweek, all the riders that have been there the entire season. They do their best. They race hard. They try what they can, and they deserve credit for the results they get, but it's no shame in admitting that they are up against two of the greatest cross riders ever. Van der Poel and Van Aert simply have such a high level, it's no shame that they can't compete with them. Today, they could keep up with Van Aert for quite a while. Eventually, Van Aert had the upper hand. I don't think that's surprising. As you say, Van Aert is good. So, yeah, both riders did what I expected, kind of what you also expected in the preview podcast, but what was your overall assessment then of Van Aert's his season start in Antwerp?
Well, I definitely think that for Van Aert it was a very good race to start your season with in terms of how he came through it, and I think that it was definitely a good performance. I was a little bit worried in the second lap that I was thinking, because then Vanthourenhout passed him as well. I was like, maybe he just did a little bit too much in the first lap, but I was like, this guy is a class rider, so he's not going to make that big of a mistake. And he made sure that in the third lap it was quite sure that he was going to fight for second, and from there on there was no doubt in anything that he was doing. He was sitting comfortably on the bike. He had that one mishap with the barriers in the sixth lap, but I think overall, apart from that mistake that he made there, I think overall it was quite a good performance, and there's not a lot of things, in my opinion, that he could have done a little bit different. And yeah, I think that Van der Poel at the moment is just a little bit better. Surprising, no. And I think that when you're coming to races that are a little bit more difficult with the mud, that suits Van Aert a little bit more, then we will also see a Van Aert that is capable of beating Van der Poel. But the playground that we had right now in Antwerp was just, too much leaning towards to Van der Poel, and yeah, for Van Aert it was just too difficult to capitalize on that.
I would say that on one hand the expectations for Van Aert were too high for a season start, but then not for the reason that Van Aert brings up. Van Aert gave an interview with Het Laatste Nieuws, a Belgian newspaper, and he said there, well, it's weird. When Pogacar and Evenepoel race Tirreno, nobody expects them to win right away if that's their first race of the season, but when I race, I'm expected to fight with Van der Poel every single time. And I think that's very simple. That's because that's how cross has always been, and because they have that level. He said second was above expectation. I would say it's on expectation because of the fact that simply when they race, they are there. If we look at the past couple of seasons, Van Aert in his COVID season had a different start because he was third in Kortrijk and third in Tabor, but in the other seasons, except his injury seasons, he was always there right from the beginning of the season. However, most people have this picture in their head that based on last season, Van Aert is way better than the rest, and therefore also expected him to be way better than Van der Poel, or maybe not way better, but at least a bit better. Normally, this pattern would be the other way around, because it was always when Van der Poel started his season, even if Van Aert was there, Van der Poel had the upper hand. If we look at that COVID season, the times that Van der Poel and Van Aert faced each other, Van Aert won 3 times. 2 times because Van der Poel was leading the race and had a puncture, and 1 time because he was clearly better in Dendermonde. If we look at the seasons before, we come to a similar pattern that the past years, and yes, Van Aert had that injury in the 2019-2020 season that came from the Tour de France. Yes, Van Aert hadn't been at his best in the 2017-2018 season due to his drama with sniper cycling. All fair points to make. Or it was actually, I think, the 2018-2019 season, maybe? I think, it was the 2018-2019 season. And those are all 4 fair points to make. But in reality, Van der Poel has had the upper hand. So it's not weird, especially on the course, as you say, that suits him so much, that he will be a bit better. In Belgium, people were on some hand getting a bit worried. On the other hand, they were hyping up Van Aert a lot, like, oh, this is just his base level. Van der Poel is near peak. I don't think that any of those assessments are fair. I think that when we come to Gavre, which is a course that realistically will suit Van Aert more, it has an extra climb compared to recent years, we'll see Van Aert fight there. Maybe we'll even see Pidcock fight there. Pidcock today, it was just not good enough. You can't permit yourself to have such a start. Of course, if we look at what happens at the start, he got blocked by Iserbyt. But Pidcock and not having the best starts is a bit of a reoccurring theme. It's a bit of a trend. I don't think that Pidcock is the best starter. I don't think he's a terrible starter. He's just sometimes unlucky because he starts on the second row. But he is the first rider called up to the second row. He makes a mistake by going to start behind Ede Iserbyt. He should start behind Kevin Kuhn. You know, Kevin Kuhn is the fastest starter week in, week out. Start behind Kevin Kuhn. Why are you lining up behind Ede Iserbyt? Maybe it wasn't the second. I think Van Aert maybe got called up ahead of it. It doesn't matter. He had many of opportunities to choose from, and he chose the wrong one. That's a mistake. You can't permit this to happen. You need to be more aware. Who am I going to start behind? And you don't choose Ede Iserbyt, who you know is not the fastest starter either. You should be starting behind Kevin Kuhn, or maybe behind Lars van der Haar, who is usually a pretty good starter, but then again, not always. Michael Van der Poel is now, I think, 8th in the World Cup standings. He will probably drop after Dublin, but if Van der Poel is on the first line up behind him. Like, why choose to start behind Ede Iserbyt? That's just something you can't permit if you are Tom Pidcock and you want to be fighting with Van der Poel and Van Aert.
No, but I think that for Pidcock, today I think he was quite clear in the interview after Boom that Antwerp was something that he looked forward for, and he was going to try to do his best, but he kind of knew with the sand that it was going to be difficult for him. We know that Pidcock has the tendency to struggle a little bit with the sand, and today it was kind of visible that is not his best attribute in terms of cyclocross. But I think that those kind of mistakes, they can be made, but it's definitely not the smartest decision to make. I think that he thought that Iserbyt was going to try to do his best to be at the front, and he made that mistake that he made, and then it's obviously a bit difficult and it compromises your race quite a bit. And I think that if Pidcock didn't have that bad of a start, he would have been a little bit further ahead of the field. But that's in the end where you kind of end up. And there were definitely on a course like this, it's super difficult in the first lap to gain positions, especially with those hills that you have. And I think that he just caught up a little bit and had some bad luck, but there are still definitely some races coming up for him where he can make it up. So I don't think that he really got bothered with it, that on a course like this he had a bad start.
No, and I was there on the course, and in the sand, you can just see Pidcock is not a sand rider, and if he messes up his start, like, that easily cost him 20 seconds. Without that, he would be fighting for top 5, which is where I would expect him to be. But this was definitely something that you can't permit yourself to happen. It's just a mistake to choose that start position. He should have gone for something else, but it is what it is. It's something that occurs a bit too often, that it looks to be that Pidcock around the start is not focused enough, that he's just a bit too relaxed. And it's good to be relaxed in a way, but you also need to have the focus and think ahead. And I hope that's something he works on, because it's not good for himself to get an 8th place. He might not be too bothered with it, but I think that he wants to be fighting for the victory every week, and if he can't do that, he is a champion and he will be somewhat upset with it. And today was definitely below par for him. But then again, next week we go to Dublin. Let's see what he can do there. Looks to be a pretty flat course. I would back Wout van Aert there because it looks to be a bit muddy. I don't think we'll get Dendermonde-like scenarios, but it should be a good course for him. And Pidcock, he said himself in the interview, well, I'm only 57 kilograms. This is not good for my raw power output, so I will struggle on some courses, and that 100% makes sense. So it's fine. But then again, I'm looking forward to Gavere. Gavere should be a very good opportunity for Pidcock to really fight with Van Aert and Van der Poel. I look forward to that like a lot. I'm super excited already because I think then is really an opportunity for Pidcock to show that if the courses suit him, he is already able to fight with Van Aert and Van der Poel, who maybe on the more modern day cross courses like Antwerp is with so many corners and obstacles. That's just more for Van der Poel and Van Aert with the acceleration, and Van der Poel today had the better acceleration than Van Aert as well, but overall I can see points for everybody to move forward from, and Pidcock has shown his form already enough this season. We know that he's talented. Let's focus on the battle for third place. Van der Haar was in it for a while, but ultimately dipped out, which left us with Vanthourenhout fighting Sweeck until the final lap. Sweeck missing out on the podium. A bit surprising. I thought here a sand course should have been something for Sweeck, but was Vanthourenhout just better, or did the way the sand was in the course not really benefit Sweeck today, Issam?
No, I don't think it was a sand issue. I think it was an issue in terms of form for Sweeck. The gap kind of was shrinking over the course of the race, and Vanthourenhout, I wouldn't say it was comfortably in third, but he held on quite well on that gap. And when you see that a gap is not closed very quickly, and I didn't expect it to be closed in a lap, but I think it was like 2-3 laps that we were seeing Sweeck close by Vanthourenhout and not being able to actually get a little bit closer. Then it becomes a little bit more difficult each lap you go in. And in the last lap, I think the gap was 4 seconds. But yeah, then I was like, Sweeck normally with the sand should have been able to close that gap, but Vanthourenhout hold on quite well. And I think that we are in a situation right now with Sweeck where that training camp that he had that week before in the European Championships, that advantage that he had over the rest is shrinking, if not already gone. And it's the form is sort of in a downward spiral right now. So I don't know what he is planning to do in terms of training camps, but maybe in the next couple of weeks he's definitely going to think about going to Spain and trying to get the form back up. But yeah, it's nothing crazy, I think.
Well, now was an interesting period in terms of that, because Trek Baloise is going on a training camp. I expect Van der Haar to skip Dublin for that reason. I expect actually most riders of Baloise Trek to skip Dublin for that reason. They're going to be training. I don't know, I think the Paul Sousa boys are going to stay in Belgium. Last year they didn't go on a training camp, I think, a single time. Only Sweeck went before Val di Sole. He skipped Val di Sole for that reason. It's an interesting time. Riders will be looking to reboot a bit towards the Christmas period. I think they're already having the advantage that there's 2 single weekends coming up, Dublin and Val di Sole. I don't expect many riders to do the double of Essen Dublin, so Essen will have a relatively poor start list. I know Annick van Alphen is starting there, but it's not going to be super packed. It's interesting, yeah. It will be interesting if he can quick it up and try and find a bit of freshness, a bit of form. Tiredness starts kicking in around here. Van der Haar also said it. His form is on his last legs. I think you saw it today as well in the final phases of the race. Lars Van der Haar, he was also falling further back, where normally in the final phases of the race he is always there. Vanthourenhout surprised me in terms of that. He was running nicely, and I thought he would struggle a bit more in the stand, but he went super well, claimed the podium. Yeah, he deserved that. Sweeck, he can also be happy. He gains a couple of points over Iserbyt, who had a decent race and ended 6th. Let's look at the entire top 10. Van der Poel with the win ahead of Van Aert and Vanthourenhout. Sweeck was 4th ahead of Lars Van der Haar and Eli Iserbyt. 7th place went to Jens Adams ahead of Tom Pidcock and Niels van der Putten, with Joran Wiesure rounding off the top 10. Wiesure in 10th, I think that's the only name really worth mentioning still in the top 10. I did not really see him that much during the race. There was a big group fighting for 9th until 14th, and eventually Wiesure comes out on top. I think it's promising because the under-23 world champion has been having a bit of a rough season. He's not really been living up to the expectations, but today was a good course for him, bit of faster racing. Form seems to be picking up. Good race by him, and I think that's another name still outside of the top 10, Tibor Del Grosso, the rider who turned down a contract at Jumbo because he wanted to keep doing cross. 12th place, he was fighting for a top 10. Super strong ride by just a second year under 23.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, definitely for Del Grosso, it's quite a noticeable good result. Also being accompanied by quite some riders that of stature in a way. So I think that he definitely performed quite well. For Viseur, it's like you said already, it's a bit of a difficult season so far for him, but he's picking it up a little bit now, and hopefully that is an upward trend that he can hold on to, because he definitely needs it. It's a season so far that is quite disappointing, and I think that for himself the expectations were high because he is obviously the under 23 world champion. So yeah, we have to see how it will go from here, and if he's able to hold that trend and get some more good results in, because if we talk about his elite results, it wasn't the greatest. So yeah, let's hope that this is the start.
Let's go and talk about the women's race then. Puk Pieterse had the fastest start, and in the first few laps of the race, she was still leading the race. Van Empel was making mistakes, catching up and making new mistakes, but these two riders managed to get away from the rest. Pieterse Van Anrooij, after a not even poor start, but an okay start, she was in 6th or 7th when they went into the field, overtook the rest, but immediately needed to close a 15-second gap on the leading duo. She took risks in doing so and crashed. That meant that Van Anrooij was not able to close the gap, so we were looking at a battle between Van Empel and Pieterse. As said, Van Empel was making a lot of mistakes, but around the halfway point of the race, she stopped making those mistakes and started taking initiative. She opened the gap through the long sand passage, and from there on, that gap just stretched and stretched. She looked to be back towards her form that we saw in the early phases of the season, and she truly put in a pretty dominant ride in that second half of the race. No mistakes were seen anymore, and she went on to take her 5th World Cup win of the season ahead of Puk Pieterse and Pieterse Van Anrooij. Issam, this race, for me, kind of the same as the men's race. It was ticking boxes from the preview because sand course, Van Empel in the best form. Yeah, I expected a win, and to be honest, Pieterse maybe was able to keep up a bit longer than I expected, but Van Empel was truly the best today, and in that second phase of the race, flawless rides. It was great to look at through the sand.
Yeah, definitely. There's not much to add on that. I think that Pieterse in the beginning of the race had her moments, but that was more because of Van Empel making the mistakes left and right a little bit in the sand, not major mistakes, but just small hiccups in the sand. And Pieterse looked in the beginning phase of the race better, but just the way Van Empel was able to bridge the gap time and time again, that already kind of says it all. And then after that, she took initiative, the gap grew, and then from that point, Van Empel was able to to even be faster than Pieterse in sections where maybe Pieterse should have been, if she wanted to make, if she wanted to have a chance, she should have been better in those sections. But Van Empel was, like you said, in descent was flawless and was able to to ride it home, and definitely back at it again. It was a performance that we have missed a little bit the last couple of weeks from Van Empel.
Yeah, just all looked good, and I don't think that there's anything to worry about or that there's really a shift in something. I just think that the course is better. We saw that in terms of physique. Van Empel and Pieterse have been evenly matched the past couple of weeks. Even in Overijse on the uphills, it looked okay. Van Empel was gaining a bit, probably due to tire pressure, but it looked pretty good. And in Hulst, they were evenly matched, but Pieterse had the better technique. Today, Van Empel had the better technique, and that was due to the sand. I don't know if the sand was a huge or as huge as it looked on the TV, like in terms of the influence. There was a lot of sand, but not all of the sand was as decisive. Van Empel also looked to be running quicker than Puck Pieterse, which makes sense since Van Empel did a lot of running. Her running technique is better than Pieterse's running technique. Then we come into your field of expertise. Issam, is that something that you also picked up, that Van Empel was running, or at least with a better technique than Pieterse, or couldn't you tell from the TV?
No. I mean, it's visible, especially with the sand. You want to have your knees a little bit higher up, and I think that you can just see. You don't really need to have a trained eye to see that Van Empel is a better runner, and those things really make a difference when you're in this type of courses. And when you are, when it takes a little bit more energy in the running because you have to run a little bit faster because of your technique, you're compromised with that. It's never a great thing, because then you have to jump on your bike again and do the racing, and sometimes it doesn't really feel right if someone else goes a little bit faster, and if you have to do that time and time again, it's difficult. And especially today in the sand, it's counting. But I think with Van Empel today, it was just it's not a shift like you said. I maybe expected a little bit more from this race in terms of a battle, but in the end, Van Empel just throw that everything away about those chances, and we just saw that Van Empel was just a little bit better on a course like this, and that Pieterse still has a gap in terms of these type of courses.
Yeah, and despite the sand maybe not being the most decisive feature due to the way the sand was implemented in the course, Van Empel still was able to utilize the opportunities that the sections of sand where you could make the difference were in the course. She was able to utilize on those options and go for it, and she made the difference in the sand and was able to extend over the running phase, so it looked good. Van Anrooij in third also looked very good through the sand despite a silly mistake in the first lap. It looked good through the sand, but I again come to the conclusion that for Van Anrooij the form isn't there at the moment to compete with Pieterse and Van Empel. That can still come. As said, she's going on a training camp with her team. I think she will also be skipping Dublin, and then she can build through the Christmas period, and with a very good block of training in another training camp around the Benidorm World Cup towards the Worlds, I think she could do very well at the World Championships in Hogerheide. We'll see what happens there. Didn't you pick her for the world title, Issam?
I did. That would be a shout if she actually managed to do so. But for now, I think there's no panic for her. And I think that she, in terms of trajectory, she has the goal to be very good on the road. And then obviously the World Championships are also a goal for her that lines quite well. So I think that in Hogerheide she will be in very good form. And, let's see what happens there then.
Before we look at the entire top 10, I would still like to say one word on the riders who weren't there. Alvarado was not here. She has been sick throughout the week, and that was an explanation for her poor result yesterday in Boom. Lucinda Brandt, DNF in Boom yesterday. Reason for that, not fit. Also, a rider I mentioned in my solo podcast yesterday, Ribeirol. She was 13th. Reason for that, cold. She therefore also did not take the start today in Antwerp. With that said, the top 10 looks like this. Van Empel won ahead of Pieterse and Van Anrooij. More Dutch riders behind, with Betsema, Van der Heijden, Bakker and Van Alphen completing the all-Dutch top 7. 8th place for Laura Verdonschot ahead of Myri Schreiber and Sanne Kant in the final spot of the top 10. I would like to mention a couple of riders here. First, very shortly, Betsema. Betsema, not a bad race today. In the first lap, she was involved in a crash. Yes, okay, her start wasn't great, but that happens from time to time. It was just so hectic, and you just knew that the section where she crashed was on the top of this hill with this U-turn, which was downhill, was going to cause issues. She got a kick or a foot on her steer from Zemanova, who was dismounting, and then she fell down and her bike was still up, needed to go back, was all the way down, kept fighting, rode back to 4th. Good result by her. She looked good in the sand. And the same goes for Inge van der Heijden. She also looked good in the sand. Course suited her. 5th place is good for her. Then we come to Manon Bakker. I think Bakker also put in a very good race today, 6th. Definitely improvements on her end. It's not been an easy season for her.
Yeah, definitely. I think that with a race like today, which was definitely more difficult than some would think because of just the sand in general and dismounting of your bike, running sections, then there's not a lot of, it's a big interval race in a way, a lot of corners where you then have to slow down completely and almost come to a complete stop and then get again. So I think that if you do well in a race like this, it means that the form is definitely there. It's not a present that you get because the presents are in at Christmas time, and I think for now for her it's definitely a race where you can build on, especially with a difficult start this season. You can get a lot of confidence out of it, and I think this is the same way we've seen with Van Alphen a couple of weeks ago, where we saw an upwards trajectory in a way with some decent results, and then from one way to the other you get into a prime position, which maybe you shouldn't have been in, and then you can really capitalize on that, and then with a bit of luck it can end up with a very good result. And the same for Bakker. It's the talent is there, but when you're just a bit unfortunate, it's difficult to then get those results in. And I think for her now the form is there, so those results will be getting in the, I guess, the most important period of cyclocross with the Christmas period.
Yeah, and the course was good for her because it involved quite some running, and Bakker has huge legs. She is so tall. That was just the speed she could carry through those running sections was amazing. So that definitely benefited her. But what did you think about Laura Verdonschot, the Belgian, who ended 8th? It was a surprise to see her in the top 10 for me, a pretty big one actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the results of this season, it's definitely a surprise. If you only look at Hulst, which you ended up 18th, and Overijs the 20th, Merckx just outside of the top 10, but you cannot really find anything there. But then with the sand that we had today, we missed one or two riders, and then I think with the experience that she has, and I guess a good day, then she was able to capitalize on that and finish within the top 10, because Verdonschot over the last couple of years has shown that when there is some sand on the course, she's definitely one of the specialists in a way. But then you also need the overall form to really utilize it, and I think that today it was for her not the best overall form, but just with that little bit of help with the sand, she was able to get in the top 10, and I think that for her is definitely one of those results that she that are important for her, for the team, and for in general for her as a rider. It's important to have those kind of results in big races, and you can only build from that, so that will definitely help to be motivated for the next couple of races that are coming up.
Yeah, it always amazes me that I always tend to forget that she's so good in the sand. She's been 6th in Koksijde before. She was 2nd at the Belgian Championships in Oostende, just behind Sanne Cant. She's done well here in Antwerp previously as well. So purely based on the course, it shouldn't be a huge surprise that she does well. But overall, her form has just like last season, the start for her to the season has been tough. But then throughout the season, she manages to improve her results, and last year that only really came at the Belgian Championships. Now she gets 8th place here, and if I'm correct, this should bring her within the rules to qualify for the Belgians world team. I remember last year she missed out because she didn't make the criteria of 2 times top 16 or 1 time top 8 in the World Cup. And now she has an 8th place, so if that's still what they base their selections on, she's going to be looking at a ticket for the Hogerheide Worlds, which is great news for her. Behind her, Schreiber, 9th place. Also another strong showing by her. We've discussed her a couple of weeks ago. Still stands, strong showing, 3rd under 23. And 10th place for Sanne Cant, also a good showing by the Belgian champion. Then Issam, I need to ask you a question. What do you think? Blow up of the week. Does it go to Mees Hendricks, who was in the wheel of Wout van Aert in the first lap and then faded? Or does it go to Blanca Vash, who was in the front of the race, and then at the end of the first lap we saw her actually walking because she was so tired.
I mean, well, I have to say that with the Hendricks blow up was definitely significant, and I was looking for the Krelon jersey in the second and third lap if I could spot it within the top 10, and it was quite difficult to do so because it was kind of gone. But I mean, the Vash one was, I think, just a little bit more funny in a way because that last sand section just before you go to the finish again in the last corner, it's just walking. And I thought there was something wrong with the bike or something, but no, it was just Vash was taking a walk in Antwerp, and I was going for a relaxing day, jumping on the bike like it was no race. I thought there was something wrong with the bike, but it was just Vash, having some difficulties after the training camp, and I think that we can give the prize to her for sure.
Then a final mention, Laura Molengraaf, a very strong race by the junior women European champion. 12th place today, was fighting for the top 10 for quite a while, and that's against another contender potentially for blow up of the week, Leonie Bentveld. She was also running in the top 10 but fell back quite significantly in the final phases of the race, but nevertheless that happens when you're young. Molengraaf and even Bentveld, despite the blow up, put in good rides today, especially Molengraaf as a junior to already end 12th here. And okay, yes, some riders aren't here, blah blah blah, but still 12th, 15th, 16th is still a very good result for a junior. She can be happy with this result. She looked good in the sand, and then afterwards she could go to Sinterklaas, who had some nice chocolates for her and the rest of the Tormans team. Issam, thank you for discussing the racing here in Antwerp with me.
Yes, thank you. Did me good. Thank you.
I'll still briefly summarize some of the results in the rest of Europe. There was racing in Italy for the 38th GP di Vento, and the men's race was won by Marcel Meisse ahead of Filippo Fontana and Jacob Dorigoni. Persico won the women's race a minute ahead of Eva Lechner and 1.5 minutes ahead of Rebecca Garibaldi. The final round of the Coupe de France took place in Troyes. Clément Horny won the men's race ahead of Loris Rouillet and Gerben Kuipers. Anne Morichon won the women's race ahead of Perrine Clausel and Amandie Vidouin. There was racing in Slovakia. They had their national championships. The men's title went to Martin Haring ahead of Samuel Kovac and Simon Vozar. The women's title went to a junior woman, a first-year junior woman, Victoria Gladonova. Remember this name, she was already second in the Tower World Cup. She has an insane power. Janica Keser-Stevkova ended second, with Dorota Wojtkova ending third for the Slovak National Championships. With that, we will finish this episode of the Cyclocross Social podcast. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be back next week with the World Cup in Dublin. See you guys then. Goodbye.